Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Ankle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old, and today I'm talking about the new album from Spunkshine, and then it was dark once more. Spunkshine, I've talked about this guy a couple of times before. He is a strange artist that combines elements of ambient music with big beat and kind of wavers through a lot of different sounds. Sometimes he can do up-tempo stuff, sometimes he does down-tempo stuff, sometimes he plays his sound very straight and is best taken totally seriously, sometimes there's kind of a jokier nature to what he does, sometimes he focuses on more electronic textures, sometimes he tries to add more acoustic textures as well. You never really know what you're getting with him. Well, okay, that's only half true. As all over the place as his sound can be, there is a specific palette of sounds and textures that he uses all the time in basically every album. And there is a specific way that he constructs chord progressions that's pretty recognizable as well. To say that he's completely unpredictable is not totally accurate. If I listen to a lot of his stuff in a short time, then I can really start to pick up on patterns in the way he puts tracks together, and some of that weirdness factor can wear off for me. But hey, that recognizability isn't necessarily a bad thing. Someone could give his stuff to me in a crowd of random downtempo artists that sound similar to him, and I'd still easily be able to figure out which one is him. That said, there is one element I wish I could also say is predictable, and that's how much I actually enjoy a given album of his. I think he's pretty dang hit and miss. Like the two albums I have reviewed from him previously, The Weight of the Ship in 2016 and The Most Distant Machine last year, I had pretty different thoughts on, despite sounding pretty similar. The former was a mixed bag at best, with a couple of good moments that still didn't really stick with me much in the long term, but the latter was one of his strongest works to date, and one that made me realize, in spite of his consistently amazingly ridiculous track titles, his stuff is best taken seriously and letting him surprise you when he actually does. My opinions on his stuff seem to change all the time. An album that I previously thought was okay could end up being good to me later, or one that I really liked could end up cooling on me, or later going back, depending on my mood. Also, I'll have to admit, a lot of his albums run a bit too long for their own good, and feel a bit padded out. Even some of my favorites from him, like his third album, And Yet It Moves, has some absolutely fantastic high points, but there's a couple of random tracks in the middle that just don't really add anything. And same goes with his last album, Most Distant Machine. That had a stretch of like 3 or 4 tracks in a row that just kind of ran together and didn't stick out, even if they would have been perfectly fine out of context. Now, I still thought the good moments on that album well made up for some of the less interesting ones, and I ended up returning to it a lot more than I expected, to the point of it making all the way up to number 5 on my best albums of 2017 list. Heck, I think that one may very well be my favorite album of his to date. Which is why I figured I ought to cover this album as well. There's a part of me who kind of wants to redo the In Brief segment on him, because I'll probably end up with completely different insights on each album, positive or negative. For instance, his first album, Distorting the Hertzian Wave, and his 6th album, El Gordo, have grown on me. And the above-mentioned And Yet It Moves has shown some weak points and inconsistencies I'm not as keen on. I don't know if I'd put that one into 8 range anymore. Though I also felt like if I marathon all his stuff again, I'll eventually get sick of him. That's kind of the thing. While I think Spunkshine has a super unique blend of sounds and styles that is totally specific to him and only him, I've also really started to feel like if you've heard one Spunkshine album, you've kinda heard them all to a certain extent. Now, there are definitely some that were able to tackle certain elements of his sound better than others, which makes for some variance from album to album and keeps me interested. And that's actually kind of the weirdest thing about him. Despite all his albums consisting of pretty much the same sounds and styles over and over, each one of them has had really different strengths and weaknesses. There are some tracks he'll do in one style that really do nothing for me on one album, but on a different album he'll do something in the exact same mold and it'll be brilliant. But yeah, that formula is still there. Each of these albums has had the exact same ingredients go into it, and it kinda took an album that didn't really have any huge strengths and weaknesses in any department for me to finally notice that big through line. And unfortunately, that album is this latest one, and then it was dark once more. I wouldn't say it's a bad album by any stretch. It still has its standouts for sure, but I think it's just kind of alright. I don't think this one offers much that you couldn't already get out of a previous Spunkshine album. It's kinda same old, and most of it just feels like stuff I've already heard from him before. Like, there's one drum break he uses, like the one from the track Shielded Realism from his last album. That shows up as the percussion track for like 3 different tracks on this album. At least Synaptic, Pruning, There's No Lack of Void, and one other, I can't remember which one. I mean, I like the sound of that break, but it's kind of frustrating. Like, there's a lot of cool moments on this album, but I was really starting to feel the formula on this one. It didn't do anything particularly strongly in any department to make it feel different from previous albums of his. It just kind of felt like another Spunkshine album. And that was about it. So I may as well tackle those standouts. This album starts out really strongly with Planned Obsolescence, another one of his usual on-brand driving big beat tracks with some of those bouncy, buzzing synth fuses all the time, but stretches on for a good 7 minutes and never really gets boring. There's a really strong and hard-hitting groove here. There's these parts in the beginning with all these stutter edits that are really fun, plenty of vocal samples coming in to keep things interesting. This is Spunkshine really bringing his A-game on this track. And the second track, Synaptic Pruning, I wasn't huge on this one when he dropped his like a pre-album teaser on his YouTube channel because of the above-mentioned recycled drum break. But it's actually become a major grower. It fills out its mix with a lot of warm and expansive and almost triumphant sounding synth pads, with piano chords and strings and other little arpeggios for texture. Sounds really emotionally charged and left a pretty strong impression on me, all things considered. Also, the I've Been Bathing Every Day sample was pretty funny. The infamous Spunkshine Waltz is a solo piano track, very Eric Satie-ish stuff at first, and later filling itself out a bit more with these ambient pads and this subtle mechanical fan-like sound. This is a really solid track there. Humans Enter took a while to get going, but it had all these bizarre twangy country guitars involved, which I don't think I've heard any Spunkshine tracks that use that kind of stuff, even if there's a lot of other instrumental elements that kind of blend in with everything else. Once we get to this part where like there's a key change, it really starts to sound really strange and distinctive. And the sample manipulation on A Mediated Retreat was absolutely beautiful. Just all these expansive, spacey choir pads and an old-timey sounding orchestral hit. It creates this little chopped up chord progression. It sounds fantastic, and again, unlike any previous Spunkshine track that comes to mind. Though eventually he breaks up this musical phrase into parts, he has trumpet lines and other strange elements here and there. I kinda wish he'd kept the full chord progression right at the beginning, going for the whole time, or just brought it back later at all. He kind of abandons that original idea partway in. But whatever, still a really solid track and easily one of the best on here. And yeah, those are probably the biggest standouts for me. Other tracks here, they similarly have compelling ideas that I can really enjoy, but don't stay that compelling from front to back. Like, I think the voice samples on The Beginning in Deliberate Sequence were all funny and added some fun personality, but the actual instrumental surrounding them is a bit by the numbers by his standards. Another Explosive Boat is a pretty silly and quirky and fun-sounding track, but ended up having diminishing returns with repeat listens. And There's No Lack of Void had this really neat Middle Eastern-sounding vocal solo about 5 minutes in, but didn't really have much that stuck out to me otherwise. And there are other tracks that didn't leave much impression on me at all. For instance, I was really excited to hear The Fatal Softness of the Earth, seeing its nearly 12-minute running time. I'm pretty sure that is his longest track to date. But if not for the length, the track would not have stuck out to me at all. It's just kind of a repetitive, low-key, almost ambient piece that never really goes anywhere or shows any compelling standout ideas, or even really emotionally resonates with me on any level. It's just kind of a track, and I found it to be pretty dang disappointing. The actual ending in Absence of Stars at least has a bit more mysterious atmosphere and makes me feel something, even if it's not the most memorable in itself. That's about all I got as far as individual tracks go. So yeah, overall, I'm really conflicted on this one. Even the least memorable tracks on here, I still can't say I think are bad. They're all really well produced, all sound like stuff only Spunkshine would do, and are probably just fine out of context. But being as familiar with his work as I am now, I just more than anything got a sense of deja vu with this album. It's the first one where I kinda went in with a certain set of expectations, and just got exactly what I thought I was going to get. It's kinda highlighted Spunkshine's tendency to recycle ideas that I never really picked up on in a big way because of how varied his focus and actual execution of said ideas could be. I mean, I appreciate its existence as being something to help me feel less confused about my feelings on his overall back catalog, And like I said, there are definitely some great moments on this thing, but I couldn't help but feel a bit underwhelmed as a whole. Spunkshine's still a really weird artist. I can tell he prides himself on his uniqueness, and that's something I've always admired about him. But I still feel like he could really try to go even weirder, try something new and out of the box. This album feels like he's just kind of going through the motions. I was hoping for a little more out of it, personally. Again, it's still a decent album, well produced, has a handful of really good tracks. I'll still be looking forward to whatever he does next, but on the whole, I feel like he has better in him than what this album delivered. I doubt it's going to enter into my regular rotation like the Most Distant Machine did. Overall, feeling a 6.7 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list or make me review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.